Hello everyone, I hope you are all doing well. In today's lecture, we're going to be finishing up the developmental progression of play with later childhood, and then you will also have a project work day. I would highly recommend starting on your child observation report and getting ahead and looking at articles for your upcoming project that is due. I will be posting tomorrow a assignment guidelines video going over the child observation report just to give you more information if you're a little bit confused in just reading the assignment. But please let me know by this week if you have any questions. It is coming up due on the 22nd, so I just want to make sure that everyone is paying attention to the due dates. And then you also have a check-in survey and a discussion post that will be due on the 15th. So please make sure that you, in your discussion post, are referencing your readings, lectures, any videos that we've watched, as well as commenting on two peers in addition to your own post. And then if you'd like to earn extra credit, please make sure that you do the check-in survey. And then starting next week, we will get into the importance of nature play, and we will have Nature for All, as well as Where Do the Children Play, a video for you to watch. And then just to give you additional information, the reading for upcoming next week I will be posting for you. It is not in one of the texts that you already own, so just keep that in mind. And then of course, if you have any questions this week, please let me know. And I am still in the process of grading your exams, so please be looking out for your scores this week. And if anyone has any questions or concerns, office hours will be starting up again this week as they are posted on the syllabus. I have office hours the same days and times each week, and then of course I'm always available by appointment. If you need that, just let me know and we can schedule something for you, and then we'll get started with today's lecture. Okay, so first we're going to start off with general characteristics of school-age children. We talked about Piaget and all his different stages, and now we're moving into older children and Piaget's concrete, operational, and formal operational thinking. So children have a need for order, and we're thinking about the characteristics not only for children at this age, but I want you to kind of be thinking ahead about for yourself and how you were at this age and then how you are now, how being a child during your school age time has shaped you into who you are today. So starting off, we have a need for order. So children at the school age, they have a need for order because they've already achieved concrete operational thinking of logic and reasoning behind their thinking. They have selective attention for problem solving and memorization of tasks. This is hence why games with rules is strongly more profound because of children's concrete operational thinking, and just kind of thinking about what games you like to play as an adult, and are they similar from the games that you played as a child? Do they differ? Children at the school age also have a sense to need to belong, and this begins around age 5 or 6 when they become more self-aware and they're less likely to point out their own strengths in comparison to quote unquote their weaknesses, of what their peers or fellow classmates are like. So and so can kick the ball further than I can, or they can draw a picture better than me. So they have a need or sense of belonging and are very aware of what their peers are doing in comparison to themselves. And just a few notes on peers. Peer groups are very exclusive, and peer groups socialize children. And I want you to watch this video, and you'll be referencing it during your discussion post this week. It's about children around the school age talking about friendships and what friendships look like to them, and understanding the perspective from a school age child and how they view their need to belong through friendships and what that looks like for them. And we'll also reference it again when we're thinking about ourselves as adults and what the meaning of friendship and socialization is. And we're also thinking about Erikson, and during the school age, children are at the industry versus inferiority. So they have a stronger focus on the outside world and the perspectives from the outside world. So am I being praised and supported? And does this encourage my self-competence? Or if I'm getting negative feedback, is this diminishing my self-competence and how I feel about myself? and kind of just thinking back again about yourself, because we're constantly reflecting on who we are as adults from how we were in our childhood. So with peer groups being very exclusive, have you ever been excluded from a group before, whether this was when you're a child or currently as an adult? And how does this make you feel? How does this set the tone for future relationships and future friendships that you might have? So if you've been excluded from a group, are you more easily interested in walking away from that group or this person? Or are you willing to open up and try again? How do you feel about learning from others at an age where you're younger versus as you start to get older? So we are thinking more logically and thinking with more reason behind our actions and our behaviors and our thoughts. So we're giving more attention to who we are and who others are. So again, like I said, please watch that video about friendship and just kind of see the difference between how the adults are talking about friendship and how children are talking about friendship. And then also referencing back to Erikson's industry versus inferiority, thinking about need for industry at the school age. So wanting to be more productive and master the environment. So do you like to be right, and why? And how can I create an environment where I'm in the right and I do everything the way that I know I can? And how do I build upon all my strengths and be the best that I can be, or be able to do something more than someone else or less than someone else, depending on what that might be. All right, so now let's talk about play of school age children, and this is going to be on this slide and then the following slide, because there's a lot about play and how it differs from our younger children who are infants and toddlers and preschoolers. We see a big shift in play and what that looks like for children at school age. So we strongly see that there's a decline in symbolic play, and we're becoming more into games with rules, and more realism is happening. So children are making a shift into more realistic thinking. As we just talked about with Piaget's concrete stages of operational thinking, we're able to have more reason and logic, problem solving, and so we're becoming more real in the way that we think. It's not about fantasy as much, and the fantasy shifts to miniature play and performing dramatization. So pretend play and storytelling tend to blend together more. So maybe you still have the same interests of that you like to play with dolls or you like to play with cars, but when you were in preschool, you were learning about how a car functions and what a car sounds like, and that you can roll a car down a ramp. And now you are pretending that your little person is inside the car and they're driving and they're having a race, and you're racing with your friends down the street. Or something I used to do when I was a child is with my Barbies, I would create scenarios with all of my Barbie dolls. I would make houses on my couch cushions in my home, and I would create jobs for them, lifestyles for them, so what they do on a day-to-day basis, and I would pretend with them. And I made a shift, and I was using miniature play, so I'm performing the dramatizations through the life of my Barbie doll. They're coming to life. And we know that now, because I have a higher form of thinking, I'm able to step outside of the play world, and I'm able to use more realism in my play and be more realistic in my thinking and represent the what could be of my play, right? And another thing that is fascinating about school age children is that they're becoming more scientific and experimental in their play. And we can think about concepts like what happens during the life cycle of a butterfly. What are the stages from becoming I'm blanking on what the lifestyle is, even though we talked about it so much when we were school age children. But I believe it's the larva, yes. And then you transform into a caterpillar and then a butterfly. And what does that look like? And how do I see that happening in the real world? What happens when a caterpillar wraps itself into a cocoon and then emerges into a butterfly, and what is the bigger meaning behind a butterfly, and potentially what they do, what they eat, where they sleep, where they have their habitats, And we can also think about early STEM. So how can I create a boat using materials that I might find in nature? I'm playing outside with my friends at recess, and we decide that we're going to be playing a game where we're traveling and we need to build a boat for our miniature figures, for example, and all we have are sticks and leaves and glue. And just for those of you that don't know the terminology, STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And some people have now adopted the new terminology of STREAM, which I love that they've brought in new concepts, because we often see arts and reading, and we want children to build upon their language and their literacy. And with this new stream, it's science, technology, reading, engineering, arts, and mathematics. So I want you to check out this integrating STEM into the elementary classroom video when you get the chance, and just see how the teachers talk about the importance of STEM activities, what STEM looks like in a school-age classroom for children, and how STEM can be used to help children understand bigger concepts of mathematics, engineering, and increase their language and literacy skills. And it's through the creation and their experimentation and allowing them to unfold a wide variety of ideas and allow them to think more logically and allow them to use those problem-solving skills in a step-by-step process and figure out what happens when. And we see that at this age, children are becoming strongly interested in the product over the process. So yes, it's important. We want children to be able to enjoy the process. That's always something that we want to strive for in order to create something that is meaningful in the classroom, something that children are interested in and that they can become inspired from. But truly, they're becoming more interested in what the product is, new emphasis on arts and crafts, or again on STEM, and what am I going to create? Am I building a rocket ship, and I need to make sure that there are 2 wings, and I need to make sure that there's a cockpit for the pilot to sit in, and I have to have 30 seats for all my passengers, and they have to be exactly the same size so that everything fits in the plane. And maybe I have to think about the ergonomics of how the seats are going to be positioned so people are comfortable. So there's so much that I can think about in the actual product and the outcome. And so we're moving from the enjoyment of the process a little bit to more of the enjoyment of, wow, I did this, I created this, I'm the master of my creation. So again, that need for industry, wanting to be more productive and master of the environment. And we can think about how we can combine both process and product, and how can I allow children to relish in both the product and the process itself, because sometimes children can become so fixated on the product that it is a struggle for them to enjoy the process. And although we want them to be able to feel confident and have a proud moment over what they've created, we don't want them to lose the enjoyment and the fulfillment of the creation itself, because that in itself is part of the learning process, is becoming more self-aware and seeing, okay, wow, I'm enjoying being able to spend time on this and having the opportunity to have time on this. And we see, and I'm going to move on to the next slide, so I'm going to, just kidding, one more. I almost missed that one. Acquisition of skills. So learning how to do so many things well and independently. And if we're interested in, I'm going to combine these two. So we're interested in the product, and if I'm not able to complete every single thing with independence fully, so maybe my zone of proximal development is a little bit bigger than my peers, and I'm constantly worrying about, okay, I have to be ahead of everybody else, or my creation is just not looking as good as my friends next to me because I don't have the same cutting techniques that they do, and my abilities in reading are a little bit slower than my peers, and so we're constantly comparing ourselves rather than being able to enjoy the process. So just something to think about when working with young children at this age. Even though they're very interested in the product over the process, there are so many ways that we can still help children to feel that enjoyment during the entire product and process journey. And going back to the acquisition of skills, so we think about all various domains and what children are able to do and how we can support them. So fine motor and creativity, what can I draw? Can I draw a big tree and a small tree next to each other? And I'm going to make sure that I have green for the leaves and brown for the trunk, and I'm going to draw a circle in the middle of my trunk because I want an animal like a squirrel to be able to live in there. And maybe I'm drawing red apples on the tree so that the squirrel has something to eat. And this is a skill that I am good at, and I draw every day when I'm in the classroom, and I look forward to when we're doing art time, or I'm so excited because I love when I get to go out and do recess time or physical activity time because I can ride my bike so fast. And I know that I can ride my bike fast because I practice it every single day. And I'm involved in big gross motor skills and risk taking. And I love when we go to the gym because I get to do rough and tumble play and throw the ball around. And it's fun for me. And I'm able to do this independently. I don't need anybody else to push me on my bike. But I could have some tips given to me, but I'm able to do this on my own. Same with being able to count to the highest number, seeing how high I can count, and practicing my mathematics, becoming more self-aware, increasing my cognitive skills. So many things that we want children to be able to do, and figuring out where their niches are and where their interests lie is still an important part of being in elementary school and being an early school ager. How can we help children to learn about higher concepts and still strive to find something that is interesting to them? Okay, so we got one more slide on play of school age children because there's so much that's happening. And again, like I said, we're making that shift. And so now we're moving on to collections and liking to collect and trade and learn about different things. So as I was just mentioning, what are children interested in, and how does this come forth in what they're doing? I remember when I was in school, erasers were the big thing to collect, and everybody wanted to have little mini erasers. And when I was a child, I had a giant rock collection, and I had this rock collection in my closet for the longest time. And I just recently decided, okay, I do not need this rock collection, but I have a rock collection now as an adult. I've just moved on from rocks that I find outside in the dirt to purchasing more expensive crystals, and now I'm figuring out what the meanings are behind those. But as a child, I was fascinated by my rock collection and being able to categorize them, which ones were big and small, and which ones had sparkles in them, which ones, I found at the beach versus that I found at the park or in the dirt, and adding new ones to my collection or different ones to my collection. Or maybe at lunchtime, somebody had a seashell that I wanted, so I'd see if they'd want to trade a rock for a seashell, and being able to learn about different things. And this is a great way for children to learn about different cultures and just what's out in the world, because there's so many different things that somebody might want to collect, and how that can relate back to who they are, their background, where they come from. So I spent a lot of time outside when I was a child, and so naturally rocks were in my environment, and this is something that was meaningful to me and my play. But for somebody else, maybe they were collecting dolls, or they were collecting articles of clothing or fabric. So many different things that could provide meaning, and these are great ways, as a teacher or someone who's working with young children, to find ways to help children to connect and build those friendships as they are coming forth with different interests that they might have. So I fondly remember as a child, show and tell was so much fun when I was growing up in an elementary school, being able to show the rest of the world in my small community of my classroom, my peers, my friends, what was interesting to me and who I was, and figuring out who I was as a child based on what my interests were. And also, at this age, play rituals become very orderly and rule oriented. So, as we know, games with rules are coming forth a bit more because we see that we're able to make that shift into logic and reasoning. And we're seeing, excuse me, we're seeing that everyday children might want to play with the same things and be in the same role. Like I said, I loved being outside, playing during recess. I love to play tag and chase, and I love doing hand games, like lemonade, crunchy ice, that was a big one, or just running around playing tetherball. And we see that because we have the final level of object play, we're able to reach a point where we can enjoy games with rules because we have an understanding of what the rules mean, how to play. The rules are agreed upon in advance and cannot be changed during the play. So if I'm playing a game of tag, I understand that once I'm tagged, I'm out, or I'm going to be the next person who's it, and I'm able to understand what that means and the meaning behind the game and identify what the rules are before I start and sit with my emotions. If I have any feelings about whether I want to play or whether I don't, I can make that decision based on what the rules are laid upon out. And this also gets us into organized sports, and this takes up much of our time because organized sports are another way to think about games with rules. During our game of tag or during a soccer game, you are on one team and you are playing against another team, and your goal is to go and kick the ball into the goal. And when you kick it into the goal, you make a point. And we see that children are in organized sports in school and making up games related to sports and spending a lot of time in sports outside of school. And this is also where their increasing interests are coming forth and flourishing, as well as where their friends are at. You often spend a lot of time in organized sports or playing games with the same people every day because they have the same interests as you, and those play rituals are becoming more prominent through organized sports and games with rules because it's an orderly thing. Every day after school or every day during recess, we're going to play soccer, or we're going to play kickball or handball or whatever that game might be. I loved Foursquare when I was a kid, and this was a game with rules that we made up, and we played this. Another one that I played that I fondly remember when I was in elementary school. I don't know if I'm the one who created this, but from my memory, I'm the one who created this game, so we'll go with that. But at my school, on my elementary school playground, we had a map of the whole world, and it was an outline, and each state, no, I'm sorry, not of the whole world, of the United States, including um, different colors for each state. So it was red, blue, green, and yellow, and each state was a different color. And I remember the person who was going to be it, they would stand on Alaska because Alaska was big and off of the main map for everyone. And each color represented a different natural disaster. A little bit jarring, but this was our game that we came up with, and we played it frequently. And the person on Alaska would stand there and they would count to whatever number we decided for that day and close their eyes, and everybody would run around and find a state that they wanted to stand on. And then when the person who was it standing on Alaska called out a color, if you were standing on that color, that means that that natural disaster would happen to you and you would be out of the game. So red, I think, was fire or lava, and yellow was quicksand. I think green was poison ivy, so not natural disaster, but something would happen and you would be out of the game. And then I think blue was the ocean or something like that. So we created this entire game with rules all based on us just being out on the playground together. And I'm going to put an emphasis when we discuss next week, talking more about this and how spending time outdoors and in nature is strongly important for play for school age children, because we're seeing that a lot of times children are spending more time indoors, and it's happening all over. And this isn't just, it isn't just for school age children, but we're seeing this early on with our young children, and we're seeing this with adults. So we're going to discuss more about the importance of recess and the importance of unstructured play as well as structured play, and we're going to talk about play versus work again later on, so we'll see some more on that. And then the last one for play with school age children that we're going to talk about on this slide is emergent interest in technology play. And we're seeing this more prominently solely because of the times that we live in. It really is a generational element of school age children and their play. We're in a world of the future where technology really does rule all. Everything is online. I remember when a while back I thought I wanted to teach elementary school, and I remember volunteering in an elementary school classroom in San Francisco, and this was a more highfalutin school in the city, so they had a little bit more money and they had more access to technology. And I remember going through a whole day, visiting and observing to see what a typical day in this elementary school classroom looked like. I think I was in the second grade room. And they spent a lot of time using iPads and playing games on there. And they had little journals that they would read and videos that they would watch, and they would sit in table groups and do work on the computer together and then comment on each other. So things that we do online now on Canvas for our adult courses, all these second graders were doing. And then they would rotate and do larger group activities where we would read as a group with the teacher, and then they would go into small table groups again and use items like magnet tiles or linking cubes. And so it was so interesting to see how technology was being primarily included in their day to day, and it was prominent. And then they went to the library and they watched a video, and it was so interesting to see that this was a part of current classrooms and was a way for learning to happen through games and technology online. Okay, so next we're moving into adolescence, and we're seeing general characteristics of adolescence make a big shift from where we were in childhood. And some of what we're talking about in the next few slides, you can apply to children who are a little bit more mature, older. But we think of general characteristics of adolescence as a need for abstract conceptualization. So they've already achieved formal operations, and now they're starting to think about ideas and theories and concepts. So we talked about earlier a child who might be interested in the life cycle of a butterfly, right? So, okay, our child in elementary school is interested in the life cycle of the butterfly. What happens from stage one to when the butterfly emerges? Where do butterflies live? What do butterflies eat? How long is the cycle? And as an adolescent, I might be looking more deeply into, excuse me, I might be looking more deeply into the meaning of the word butterfly. Where is the word butterfly derived from? And what continents have primarily butterflies? Where are certain types of butterflies migrating from? When do they migrate? Why do they migrate? What is migration? And then maybe I'm getting into migration of different animals, and then maybe I might be thinking beyond just the butterfly and beyond animals, but migration of people. And now I'm thinking about, okay, different countries and continents, and I might be going back to historical points of the world and what happens in migration back in the 1800s. So now I'm getting into even more theories and concepts based on a simple pinpoint of the life cycle of a butterfly. You didn't think I was going to go there, did you? But really, that's what happens, is we're making a huge shift from our childhood thinking into deeper concepts that have deeper meanings. And we're thinking about, how can I apply what I'm doing to what I'm learning, or vice versa. So we see that our interests are now becoming bigger concepts, and we're learning through theory. So what are ideas? If my interests are about cars. What are the history of cars and how are cars made? What are the different parts that go into taking out the engine of a car and getting it to start and being able to turn the wires and things like that. So bigger concepts and ideas. And also we're thinking about how can I engage in excuse me, that one was a mouthful. Hypothetical deductive reasoning. So considering a variety of different possibilities and becoming very idealistic in thinking. So what do you think about this? And what do you talk about to your friends? And I want you to reflect back on the video from earlier about friendships, and I want you to see the shift in language and conceptualization from the adult in comparison to the child that they're sitting next to and their ideas of friendships. So we see the types of questions that the adult is asking the child and the responses that we're getting from the child. And so I want you to just see the difference in their shift in thinking and where they're at and how friendships look at different ages. And then also there's just a funny picture that I included here about making friends. And you see on the left hand side, when you're a grown up, sure, we eat lunch together sometimes, but does that make us friends or just friendly coworkers? Maybe they're just being polite. Oh God, they probably all just hate me. And then you see when you're a little kid, what's your name? Terry. Want to be friends? Okay. Much more simple interactions that create friendships. And you can see the overzealous thinking of the adult and thinking about the conceptualization and ideas and deeper meanings behind what friendships really are. And we also believe that imaginary audiences, so what's important to me is important to you, and personal fables of no one understands me. And also our need for communication and need for identity are becoming extremely prominent in adolescence. So our need for communication, we have a strong desire to want to connect with other human beings. I remember when I was in high school, I took a speech and debate class, and it was fascinating to see everyone sharing ideas and referencing theories and the concepts that we discussed and the dialect that we used in order to create conversation and the dynamic of differences and perspectives that we were learning about. And it was so fascinating to be able to have conversation and have a strong need to want to communicate and to share my thoughts and share my ideas. It was almost like, okay, I have to speak too. I can't just be left under the rug. I need to be able to share my ideas and debate my perspectives and talk about what I'm passionate about and what I'd like to share with others who might have something in common with me. And thinking about how my communication with others shapes my identity. And if I communicate this with somebody, are they going to be reciprocal in their communication? Are we going to have something in common? Or are we going to have something that is different about us? And can we still continue to have conversations and communicate even though we maybe disagree on certain things or we don't always have the same interests? Can we still be friends or have relationships? And how does my identity form between myself and between others? So we're continuing to think about Erikson stages beyond childhood. So we thought about Erikson stages of industry versus inferiority and the world around us. And we're still thinking about the world around us, but we're a lot more focused on who we are as a person. So around 13, we're starting to get into our teen years and we're thinking, okay, who am I? My identity versus my role confusion. And we often ask high schoolers, we ask younger children this too, what do you want to be when you grow up? And this question continues and continues all throughout our adolescence because we don't know yet. We don't even know who we are. We have ideas about what we like and things that we're interested in, but we're still figuring out, who am I? How do I fit into the world? What do I want to be? Who do I want to be? What makes me unique and special? And so I'm unsure of what my role in the world is. And our roles are changing constantly. And as we change, our identity is changing. And we become more connected with those around us in our need for identity when we enter adulthood and we're getting into intimacy versus isolation. So, how can I create a balance with myself versus with others? Who am I alone in comparison to who am I when I'm with someone? And how does who I how do I said that incorrectly. How do my past relationships or who I was as a child impact who I am currently and my identity of self? What does that look like? And this often can be difficult for young adolescents to figure out. It's a lot on their plate, and there are some big shifts in what are expected, and what we're learning about in school changes drastically. Of you have to be able to do this, and these are things that you're going to need to know as an adult. And I'm going to move on to the next slide about adolescent play. Okay, so picking up right where we left off, we were just talking about identity, and a lot of our identity comes through our leisure activities, and we're going to again get into more play versus work and work versus play. And you kind of thought a little bit about what play looks like for you, and typically adolescent play is through unstructured leisure activities, and we think about characteristics like we were applying earlier. So our need for communication and wanting to share ideas and our need for identity, it often comes out sometimes in our leisure activities. So we think about, what do I want to do? When do I want to do it? What does unstructured time look like for you? And thinking about how we might engage in games, or we might engage in sports. We might engage in mindlessly watching TV, and we see that screen time does increase during the adolescent years. And of course, this is definitely correlated to our world that we live in now, predominantly being a technology based world, and our use of technology is just more prominent. And we see a decline in games with rules. Specifically, we start to specialize in activities that we're good at. So maybe games with rules is something that I'm good at. So I might not be in that decline with games with rules. But overall, we start to see that we're paying more attention to hobbies that we enjoy, and we might be in entering the work field. A lot of adolescents start work, and they have to think about, okay, what is work versus play for me, a little bit earlier on than those of us who are primarily focusing on school. And so we see a decline in games with rules during play, because play has become more unstructured leisure time, because school is often a place where there are a lot of rules, a lot of structure, and a lot of brain power is being used during school time and work time. And so leisure activities are a little bit mindless and meant to relax us in a sense. And also, during adolescent play, we think about how we're seeking self-awareness, romantic socialization, intimate communication. So we have events at schools such as dances and clubs, and these are places where we're seeking that self-awareness. So for myself, I was in choir all throughout middle school and high school, and this is where I built friendships and I figured out a little bit of who I was. And we're also wanting to build friendships that are more than just platonically. We want romantic relationships. And this starts with something deeper. And it's a new category that we are building into our lifestyle of what relationships look like. So we want to hang out with people who are more than just our friends. And of course, this starts with somebody who has the same interests as us, somebody maybe I've met in my class, somebody who I find interesting from their perspectives or their ideas or the way that they think. So again, I'm paying more attention to somebody's ideas, their thinking. I'm using my ideas and someone else's ideas that have a deeper meaning and thinking about, okay, what does someone else think and what do I think? And I'm using deductive reasoning to be able to determine, okay, this is somebody that I might enjoy hanging out with. I'm considering all the different types of possibilities. I'm being very idealistic again in my thinking and deciding whether or not this person is going to be a good fit for me in my life. And this comes with a lot of trial and error, and our intimate communication really comes down to being able to open ourselves up and being vulnerable to the unknown. And this can be extremely intimidating during middle school and high school because we don't know who we are yet. So having intimate conversations can be a bit unnerving because we don't know how somebody's going to react, because we don't know how we feel about ourselves yet. And although we have a strong desire for communication with others and we want to figure out who we are so badly, we're unsure for a while. And some people come to find who they want to be very quickly, and that might be because they are involved more in their community or school or clubs, and so they found their niche and have a comfort. But for those who kind of just go around and try out different things, there's still that role confusion, and we don't see intimacy versus isolation until later on after middle school and high school. And so we're just starting out with building those intimate communication connections with others and being able to see new perspectives and sharing yourself with another person who you feel that you can trust and that you can confide in. And we see adolescence as a time where peaks in development are happening, and there's a big shift in who I am. I'm not a child, but I'm not an adult yet, so who am I to compare myself with? And no one understands me at this age except my peers, and even then they still don't understand me because I'm the only one going through this. So I'm finding out who I am and trying to figure out my self-awareness, and this is a difficult time often. And we're going to talk about difficult times again in relationship to COVID, because that has been a very prevalent occurrence in many of our lives. No matter what age group, COVID has impacted us all in some way. So we see that COVID has impacted play, it's impacted schools, it's impacted relationships. And we see that COVID is not as detrimentalizing as it was when it first began, but there are still ramifications to COVID and the way that we do things in our society when going to school or when going out in public are a little bit different now. And we have potentially reservations about being around large groups of people. And so I want you to kind of think about that and think about what we just talked about with later childhood and the desire for a need to belong and the desire to communicate with others and be around other people. How does COVID play a role in this? Or how did COVID play a role in this? Think about where you were at during COVID. Were you in school still? Were you unable to visit with your family or friends? How did that impact your relationships? How did that impact who you were as a person? And I also want you to think about how COVID has affected children's play. Were children able to go outside and play with their friends? Were they able to go to school and be around peers and make connections with them? No, not as much. We had to do everything through a screen or not at all for a while until we figured out how to adapt to the new world. So thinking about how COVID has affected children's play and their school and their relationships across all ages. I remember when I was still a infant and toddler teacher, we attempted to do Zoom meetings, but how do you do a Zoom meeting with a 6-month-old and build a true meaningful relationship where they trust you and where they're a person that you see day in and day out? And how do you be a caretaker to them over Zoom? It's impossible. And if you're a child now going to elementary school for the first time and you were cut off from everybody during COVID, how does it feel to be back? And how are you going to play with other children if you never had the opportunity before? Or you don't know how to socialize? Or if your time during COVID was spent when you were in middle school or high school and you had to go through graduation, and now you're in college and you didn't get your graduation experience. That was my brother. He didn't get to go to his graduation and then all of a sudden had to be a college kid, a college student, and he didn't even know what the college life was to expect. Didn't get that real experience. And so we've all had a different way that COVID has impacted us. So I want you to take a peek at the video here, Quarantines. So teenagers reveal what being in quarantine during COVID-19 is really like. And just think about what are the positives, what are the negatives, and thinking about how you were impacted by COVID. And does it still impact you today? And do you see the effects of COVID in schools today and in children's play today? And what does that look like? And that's all I have for you for today's lecture, everyone. So next week, like I mentioned, we'll get into nature play, and please be looking out for any announcements that I post this week. Those are always a great way to help you stay on track. In addition to listening and watching the lecture videos each week, I do try and post announcements at least once or twice a week for you all to see. And of course, if you ever have questions or concerns, please reach out to me and I will talk to you next week. Bye, everyone.